Hey guys, coming in time for Scream Queen Season 1, Episode 8, Mommie Dearest. And I didn't really know how this episode was going to be because, of course, last week's really disappointed me. It was really filler. Nothing really happened in last week's episode. And I was really hoping this episode would be great. Was this episode great? No. This episode, again, was not a great episode, but it was definitely a much better episode than last week's. The main problem with this episode is how overstuffed it was. Because of last week's plot, there's a huge focus on Munch in this episode that I felt was completely unneeded, and there was a lot of things in this episode that I felt was kind of unneeded, including a death. And we now have 4 episodes left, and honestly, guys, I don't really know what's going to happen from the rest of the show, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. Mainly because I don't like how this show is, afraid to kill off certain characters. I mean, Ryan Murphy has stated that only 4 characters are supposed to live at the end of this season. And we are on episode 8, and I feel like they should have killed off a main character by now. But let's just get into this episode. There's a lot to get into as usual, and let's get into it. So as we know, of course, last week, one of the more interesting parts of last week, Grace, made that deal with Munch that if she proved that Feather was the killer, of Steven, that Munch would reveal to her who the baby in the bathtub was. And when we get there right away, Munch has no recollection of this. And Munch clearly has her own agenda. She has no recollection. She says that, she says she was probably high on Clonopin and she can't be held accountable for anything she may have said during that time. And I'd like you guys to know that nothing in this scene was funny. They tried to make this scene funny. I didn't find anything here funny. Munch also says that Feather is the Red Devil killer, and I'm like, are we still on this? Like, seriously, this is stupid. The murders have nothing to do with what may or may not have happened to Kappa 20 years ago, so it doesn't even matter anymore, and since Feather has been caught, there's nothing to worry about. Now, why the fuck would Feather go around killing Kappa students? Makes no sense. So I don't know why Munch felt this story made any sense whatsoever, because it doesn't, and Grace is noticeably angry that Munch will not offer up any information, which, by the way, let me say, this was definitely one of the better episodes for Grace. I actually really liked her in this episode, definitely. She tells Munch that she knows for a fact that Munch is going to ignore everything that's going on at Wallace University until it personally sneaks up behind her and stabs her in the head. She then storms out of Munch's office, and then we get to what I felt was a completely unneeded scene. Now, yes, the idea, I understand that Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. I understand that. I get that, they wanted to replicate that scene with her. I think that's a really cool idea. Not for this episode. Not when we're on episode 8. I agree with what everyone else has said, that this would have been a lot better if we would have had this in, say, like, episode 2, episode 3. This is not something you do so late in the season. This is something you do early to get people to watch, and it is a really great scene, I will say that. I thought it was actually pretty thrilling. She gets into the shower, but basically when the Red Devil's there, she notices the Red Devil right away, and just the Red Devil raises their knife and pulls out the curtain. Munch comes from behind, smashes their face against the wall in the bathtub. She gives him a quick punch in the face before running to her foyer to call 911. Meanwhile, the Red Devil begins to get up from the bathroom floor, heads towards Munch. Munch ends up just hanging up the phone because she's frustrated with 911's new automated system. I love the part where they're like, if you are worried about these certain things, this is not for 911. 911 is for emergency calls only. I thought that was definitely very funny. But she doesn't have time to deal with it since she hears the Red Devil approaching. She grabs a fireplace poker. She starts repeatedly whacking the Red Devil with it. But this part of the episode, I have to say, I don't agree with what people have said. I actually think this would have been better if it was later in the season, because again, we have 5 episodes left, and I mean, this really felt very anticlimactic. This is only beginning the episode, keep in mind. I mean, this was very strange. Munch opens the door to an adjacent room. Another Red Devil emerges, this one wielding an axe. And as Red Devil 2 helps Red Devil 1 get up off the floor, suddenly another murderer carrying a hammer shows up as Supreme Court Justice Antonion Scalia, and Munch then tells the murderers that when she was a junior in college, she spent a year abroad, had an affair with a beautiful Eurasian man who taught her everything he knew about fighting in return for her teaching him everything she knew about making love, then gets ready for the blows. She then proceeds to get into a full-on brawl with the murderers, smacking them against various objects, throwing them against walls, knocking them all to the ground. Just as Scalia won't go down without a fight, Munch personally punches them several times in the face before they fall to the ground, and unable to defeat Munch, the 3 murderers finally give up and quickly flee the scene. Now, again, this wasn't bad, but I really felt like Munch should have been killed in this scene. I mean, I thought it was really stupid that she got out so scot-free. Plus, now we know that Munch is not the killer, and I think it's really anticlimactic. I mean, there could have been a way for them to show us that Munch wasn't the killer, and that whole episode last week was pointless now. Okay, that's what this scene tells us. That entire episode was completely pointless. There was no reason to go into that plot line. There was no reason to talk about it. It does not get brought up at all again in this episode. So overall, everything that happened with Munch in last week's episode was pointless. There was no reason for us to know about it because it gave me the impression that Munch is the killer, and now we know that Munch is not. And I thought it was really, really stupid. I will say, however, this was probably Chanel's best episode. I thought Emma Roberts as a whole was the best in this episode. She was at her downright meanest, but also had some really good character moments, actually, especially for Chanel. This was a really great episode for the Chanels, definitely. Chanel conducts a meeting with the rest of the Chanels to see what evidence they discovered that proves Zeta and Grace are the killers. Remember, that's what she's trying to do now. Hester says, and I love how the Chanels continue to be no help. Hester goes on to talk about Zeta and Grace. They're both on the pill and how they're connected. And she comes with this ridiculous scenario that those who pill together kill together. And Chanel gets annoyed that that's not even a saying. And then Chanel number 5, I mean, this was just great. She plans on killing again, but then when you rearrange the letters in her name, it spells out, I may slay Liz Dodd. She doesn't even know what that means. But clearly Zayde is contemplating slaying her, and Chanel gets angry that all the clues are terrible, says that in order to get anything done right, you have to pay someone a lot of money to do it, and that's just what she plans on doing. So then you have Denise, who I felt was completely didn't even need to be here, honestly. I did not like Denise in this episode. I usually really like her, and this episode I thought she was kind of annoying, actually. I usually really like her, but I really did not like her in this episode. I do like that she's now the head mistress of the sorority. I think that's pretty cool. Kind of came out of nowhere. We didn't hear that any of this was going to happen. I mean, we know that Munch and Gigi were going to move in, but nothing about Denise. I mean, we do get a flashback, but we basically, Chanel number 3 comes down the stairs, that's what she's doing, and we see a flashback shows her telling Munch that she doesn't want to sleep in her car anymore when there's a perfectly good room in Kappa not being utilized just because Chanel number 2 was murdered there. The fact that we realize she sleeps in her car is ridiculous. I mean, I understand that the sorority's not safe, but come on, there are other rooms in the college besides the sorority house. You could have stayed in any room possible, and that's where you go. Munch just wants her to shut up. She says it's perfectly fine that Denise moves in, and then Denise is finally happy. Chanel number 3 then tells Denise that Miss Bean's face got fried off in the same fryer she was using to make the french fries, and that the oil was probably never changed. And afterwards, since none of the Chanels even eat, she doesn't even care. So Denise doesn't really seem to care, and Chanel number 3 says that she wants to offer Denise a ridiculous amount of money. And this was a good idea here. She offers her this idea that she wants to give her a bunch of money if she could prove that Zayde's the killer. She tells Denise to picture the largest number she can in her head. Denise says 3 million, and Chanel number 3 questions why that's the largest number Denise could think of, but agrees to give her the amount, and basically that's what happens with that. And by the way, this episode was funny. There were some funny moments, like that scene with the Chanels, I thought was funny. There were some moments with Denise that was funny. I just felt as, in terms of Denise, the character, this was definitely her weakest episode. And especially after 2 episodes of her barely being in it, I really felt that this episode was pretty disappointing because we haven't had a lot with her in a while, and I thought this was pretty disappointing that, she's back and now it was kind of pointless. So Grace is again meeting with Munch again in her office, and I'm just thinking, why the hell would you go back to her? I mean, she gave you no advice. She gave you no facts the first time. Why would she give you facts again this time? Why would you think, you could have any faith in her? I mean, Grace is just stupid, and I guess that's the point, but it's just annoying. Okay, I understand that the part of the reason why Grace is supposed to be funny is that she's stupid, but that's not why a character's funny. A character's not funny because they're stupid. They're funny because of the way they carry themselves, and Grace, like I said, is plain Jane. That's Grace. She's plain. She's boring, and this episode does make her a bit more interesting, but still, this was ridiculous, and basically, Munch personally got attacked by the killer. She's now willing to give some information to Grace, because she's gotten attacked, just as Grace had predicted. And I understand that Grace obviously wanted to go back to her after that, but still, I thought this was stupid. Munch tells Grace that she hypothetically would be an accessory to homicide if she did in fact witness the death of Kappa in 1995 and proceeded to cover it up. She says that even if she did think the murders were linked to what happened 20 years ago, she couldn't start offering up information to the authorities because she would risk implicating herself. Now, here's the thing with this scene. I honestly thought this should have been the opening to the episode because, like I said, pretty much everything that happened in last week's episode we realize now is pointless. And this proves that. I mean, this scene proves that they don't bring up anything with Feather. They don't bring up anything that happened. It's not important at all. There was nothing important about what happened in last week's episode, and this just proves that. So I really felt everything they did last week was pointless, and it's really disappointing because I thought we were going somewhere, and now it turns out we're not going anywhere. But I will say that, the scene with Munch was good, but I just felt the whole Psycho thing, they only did that so they could have a Psycho reference. They didn't do it, it didn't go in context. They did it out of nowhere. I get that the show is supposed to do things spontaneously, but the show doesn't really have a formula. Scream Queens think they have a formula. Their formula is 7 minutes in hell. That's a good formula to follow. Pumpkin Patch is a good formula to follow. This scattered storytelling is not a good way to follow. I mean, once again, this feels like two separate episodes until they combine both storylines together, and I'll talk about that. But basically, Munch tells Grace she hypothetically be an accessory. She also says that she thought someone would just shoot the killer and be all over with. But now, since they were coming after her and Wallace University would not survive without her, something needs to be done. And, oh, now you realize that, Munch. Okay, now after you've gone attacked, you realize that it's serious. Whatever. And it doesn't go with Munch's character at all. It seemed like she was working with the killer, or that she's just as dark as the killer. It doesn't really make any sense. They don't make it seem like she's hiding anything. They don't make it seem like she has some darker agenda like it seemed like in last week's episode, which, by the way, is still Munch's best scene on this show, I will say. And it's really disappointing. And the most disappointing thing about all this is, if you guys know, Ryan Murphy creates Scream Queens because he wanted to work with Jamie Lee Curtis, and this is what we're getting from her. It's really disappointing. She then hands Grace a file that contains the name of the girl who died in the tub, but Grace complains that it's not enough. She needs to know everything about what happened to the baby and all the other girls that were there. And Munch says she doesn't know because cover-ups only work if everyone has tiny bits of information. She says it's up to Grace to piece it all together. Grayson looks at the name of the bathtub baby's mother, and the baby's mother's name is Sophia Doyle. She immediately gets confused because she was convinced that she was the bathtub baby, but her mom's last name was Mulligan, according to Wes. And Munch tells Grace that she acts like she's the hero who's trying to solve the murders and bring justice to campus, but it's really just about her finding out who her mother is. And Grace gets angry, says she wants to solve the murders, but she also wants to know if she's the reason why they're happening. Munch says the less we know about ourselves, the better, that rummaging around in our hour life is digging around like a landfill, da-da-da-da. She tells me, this scene was boring, honestly. This scene was pointless. She tells Grace that she might find something interesting, but she's going to get filthy doing it. Grace quickly grabs her belongings, storms out of Munch's office once again, and wants to prove her wrong. So, basically, the rest of the episode is Grace trying to prove her wrong. Now, Jennifer in this episode, what the fuck? I mean, I forgot that Jennifer was even on this show, and again, this is what they think we should have in episode 8. Again, we are on episode 8, and this is the person that gets killed. We'll talk about this, but she's seen dumping shopping bags filled with candles onto her bed. She's telling me how she's gonna kill that dumb bitch. When Denise swings by and asks who she's talking about, Denise says the girl at Candle Junction doesn't understand the concept of 22 for the price of 20 sale, so now her life is ruined, and Denise says that's fascinating and quickly changes the subject by asking Jennifer about Zayday, and Jennifer says that Zayday's really nice, that there's no way she could be the killer, and yeah, no shit. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, looks can be deceiving. Have you never heard this, Jennifer? Are you really that stupid? However, Jennifer did become suspicious when Zayday told her a story about how there was a group of rich girls at her high school called the Peacocks who told her to dress up in her nicest outfit and sit with them at lunch. The whole time they made fun of Zayday's outfit for being too cheap, and since that moment she vowed to get revenge and entitled Rich Girls Everywhere. And Jennifer says that now that she thinks about Zayday could totally be a serial killer. And just then, Zayday walks out of the bathroom, gets mad that Denise and Jennifer are making false assumptions about her. Since she heard every single thing they said, she tells Jennifer that she might want to check the bathroom before she decides to tell personal stories about her sweet mates. And she tells Denise she wishes she was a serial killer, she should just kill her first. She warns both Denise and Jennifer to stay away from her. And that is all we get from Zayday in this episode. Seriously, that's it. That's all we get from Zayday, and it's really disappointing. I mean, I was enjoying Zayday as a character, and I genuinely want to see her presidential stuff with Chanel, but we can't get to that because we have to focus on this, and it's really annoying. I've heard people complain about this, and I'm gonna complain too. They only talk about the killer on this show. They don't talk about their personal lives. We don't really get into it. That's part of the reasons why this show isn't working for me, because the characters are very one note, and Zadie's a character that had a lot of potential, and this is what she's getting. And then Jennifer's death was so random. She's talking about how the study wick is on the particular candles when suddenly the Red Devil opens the door, sneaks into her room. She suspects that it's one of the other Cabot sisters and yells, "Guys, I'm recording," to stop her from interrupting her. And without warning, the Red Devil stabs her in the head. Her face collapses on her laptop keyboard, which I will say was creative. I thought that was creative the way they did that. But we are on episode 8, and you still aren't killing off a main character. I'll tell you who should have died. Munch should have died in this episode. Honestly, Munch dies, it could be really great. It's not because Munch is my least favorite character. Very quickly, she's becoming my least favorite character. Wes actually is becoming maybe a bit of a better character, even though he's very, very boring still, and very obviously, stupid. But Munch should have died in that scene. It would have made sense for that to happen, and there should be people dead right now. Pete should be dead. Munch should be dead. Wes should be dead. I mean, there are people that should be dead and they're not dead. One of the Chanels needs to die. We cannot have this, honestly. I am tired of them just killing off minor characters. It worked in 7 Minutes in Hell because that's what it was funny that way. The fact that we thought that it was going to be 3 people and then was them. It was funny because of the irony. That's why that was funny. This wasn't funny. This wasn't creative at all. It just felt very cheap. It felt like Ryan was like, oh, we got to kill someone, so they killed Jennifer. Whatever. So Denise then calls me with the Chanels and asks them if she could have a 10% advance on the $3 million she was offered. Chanel agrees and excuses herself to meet up with Chad for their night of 1,000 compliments, which, yes, Chad has barely anything to do in this episode. The only thing we get of Chad in this episode is when Chad sits across from Chanel and consistently compliments her. It's very funny. The fact that he kept complimenting himself was really great, and by far one of the funniest things we've seen, I think, in the whole show. Chad, like I said, is very quickly becoming my favorite character. I think he definitely is my favorite character on the show. Chanel starts heading downstairs, and number 3, number 5, and Hester and Denise all follow. Chanel starts complaining of there being an awful burning smell, and as they walk downstairs to our dining room, they witness Jennifer's dead body, frozen stiff on the dinner table in a meditation pose. Her body is covered in melted wax, and she has a candle melting on her head. She's holding 2 burning candles and has multiple candles surrounding her. The girls scream in horror, and basically they have a whole funeral for her. Munch says there's going to be a vigil and moment of silence of Jennifer on the main quad under an oak tree. And Chanel is outraged as she watched the live stream from a laptop inside Kappa House. And we'll talk about this in a second, but basically, Grace meets up with Pete to do some investigating on Sophia Doyle. Pete tries to, now you guys know, my least favorite part of this show is anything that goes on between Grace and Pete, and this wasn't much better. They basically are just talking about what's going on with Sophia, and that says she knows Sophia's her mom, that she's had a feeling she was a bathtub baby since those murders started, and Grace says she always was a benevolent spirit and everything, and just, we've realized that she came to Wallace to move on from her mom's death, which I thought was good that we found that out. But Pete suggested they should look into the Hag of the Shady Lane since she's the one who took care of the baby before disappearing altogether. So he thinks they should visit the only logical place where crazy people go, of course, that is the insane asylum. So this is where we actually get one of the actual big things of this episode, because they go to the woman who paints them all at the asylum. They ask her if she remembers a girl from about 20 years ago who wailed a lot and maybe had a baby with her. The lady hands them 2 paintings, one of Gigi, the other of Gigi holding 2 babies, and Gigi's wearing a hood over her head, and Grace realizes that Gigi is the Hag of Shady Lane, and her and Pete run out of the asylum with the paintings. And again, this feels very one note. It doesn't feel like a big reveal. It just feels like, no shit. Like, I can't believe that Wes isn't thinking that something is up with Gigi. It's really fucking stupid. I mean, it's obvious, and Grace knows. She goes to confront Gigi. Gigi is basically denying everything at first, but then tells her what's really going on, and her and Wes are engaged, apparently now. Okay, I don't care. I honestly don't care. The fact that Wes wouldn't believe his own daughter over Gigi is so stupid. I don't understand this. Why would you believe Gigi and not your daughter? It doesn't make sense. I mean, he's supposed to be there for his daughter. He came to the campus because of his daughter, and it's just really stupid. And Grace is convinced now that Wes and Gigi are working together, which I think could be a possibility, but it would be really stupid because, one, Wes is very boring and very, just annoying. 2, I don't give a shit about this storyline. I really don't. I like Gigi, but Wes is just Every time he talks, I want to fall asleep. That's how Wes is for me. I can't stand him. I can't stand him. And the reason I'm so upset is because everything else that happens this episode besides that is really great, honestly. Um, we see that Chanel is upset that Cap is over and they can't throw any more awesome parties. So she decides to enlist two officers from a different country to justify that Grace is the killer. I thought this was very smart of Chanel to do this, even though these are two officers that are from a completely different country. I thought that was very funny. So the evidence shows that Grace could be the killer, and Chanel fusses Grace out, and Grace basically. Then we get basically Chanel is this file that has all these details about Grace's mother, and here is where we get the really great stuff. Everything we find out about Grace's mother in this episode is great. This is something that I really liked. We find out basically Chanel reveals to Grace everything that's going on with mother. We find out that Wes was actually a DJ at the Cabot party. Remember that girl that said Waterfalls is my jam? That was Grace's mother, Bethany, where Sophia died, got pregnant, and Bethany later changed her name to Mary Mulligan to cover up that she was involved in Sophia's death. So 9 months later, Grace was born. That drove Mary off the deep end. She was arrested for shoplifting, petty lunacy, grand lunacy, drunk driving with a baby in her lab, drunk driving with a baby on top of her car, possession of meth with intent to distribute. Was sued for custody of the baby and won. Mary died 1 year later after driving drunk and crashing into a tree that turned into a fire, and basically that's everything that happened. And Grace doesn't want to believe any of this. She doesn't want to believe that, obviously, she doesn't want to believe Chanel, and she slaps Chanel because Chanel basically tells her that her mother is a slut, and I really like this character development. This is great. I love this. Like, I was at the scene, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And the reason it's so great is because the rest of the episode wasn't as great as this. I mean, this keeps happening where you have these amazing scenes, and this is a great example of that. This is one of the best things we have found out. I mean, the fact that we now know all this stuff about her mother, I find very interesting, and I definitely really like that. And the way that Wes has covered things up because of because of how ashamed he was, I definitely really like that. Even though I don't really like Wes, I can understand why he would cover that up. So, Grace goes to ask Wes if it's the truth. He says it is. He says he didn't want to tell her the truth, and we find out that things are not better for Chanel's mother though, because Denise then ushers Chanel out of a meeting and tells her to apologize to Grace because she doesn't want her to frame Grace and basically she declines obviously, but then Denise decides to threaten Chanel, and that threat is that she'll take Chanel's man. She'll take Chad, and obviously Chanel doesn't like that. And then we get what is by far Chanel's best scene. I mean, this is the first time we've actually seen Chanel as a decent human being. I really like this scene with her and Grace because you kind of see why Chanel is as fucked up as she is. I mean, her mother beat her, and her mother beat her children. And yes, Chanel's siblings' names were weird. Definitely, I will attest to that. But her mother beat her siblings. She beat Chanel. I mean, she was very abusive, and I guess that they were trying to. The reason the episode was called Mommie Dearest is because it's supposed to be a reference to the movie Mommie Dearest. But what Chanel says is Grace very interesting. She's wondering if, Chanel says that she actually came there to basically be a better person than her mom was. That's kind of why she's there. And she hasn't been. She's kind of fallen the same path. And she's wondering if maybe they both came there to bond together, which is definitely very interesting. If Chanel and Grace are actually going to have a real bonding, this could be really, really interesting. And this is something that I would really like to see. Honestly, this is great. I really love this, and I think it'd be very interesting if Chanel and Grace decide to drop everything and just work together. That would be amazing if it happened, and it was great. I mean, a scene like that comes out of nowhere, and that's something I love. That was an awesome scene. Emma Roberts and Skylar Samuels were great in that scene, and definitely really great stuff there. So then we get the ending of this episode, which was great. I loved the ending of this episode, of course. The one character we haven't seen in so long is Boone. We know that Boone's alive. We finally see him in this episode. He's working out. He's disguised as Joaquin Phoenix. The entire crowd thinks he's Joaquin Phoenix. His phone rings, he answers it, and then says that Gigi must be eradicated, because of the costume and we realize that she was the one that wore the costume at Munch's house, and not only that, but he wants to take out Gigi. He doesn't think that she's working this well at all. He doesn't want her to work for them, and he just wants to do this on his own, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, like I said, a very scattered episode. There was some stuff in this episode that could have been really great. Honestly, guys, I would have wanted this episode to just focus on Grace's mother and Chanel's mother, because that stuff is really interesting. Everything going on with Munch was pointless. Everything with Munch. Both scenes with Grace I found very pointless. I just found like they needed something for Munch to do, so they had these two scenes. And they're really not utilizing her very well at all, and I don't really like what's going on with her. What the hell happened with this whole Zayday situation? I mean, Denise still thinks that she's the killer. I'm pretty sure she still thinks that. So why didn't Denise maybe try to start something over? I don't really understand it. Maybe she could have made a deal with Chanel to prove that Zayday's the killer, not Grace. I mean, you would have thought that, but that's not what happened here. I don't really understand it, but let me know what you guys thought of that. Obviously, Wes, stop trusting Gigi. Like, seriously, are you that much of an idiot? Why would you trust Gigi? She's clearly insane. She's clearly mentally unstable. I don't know why the hell you continually decide to trust her over your own daughter's word. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I really want to know why the hell Wes thinks that he should listen to this girl that he's just met over his own daughter. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but that's what's going on with that. We'll have to see what happens there. Is there actually going to be a bonding between Grace and Chanel? I think it'd be very interesting if it happens. I definitely really like that. The promo for next week really pissed me off because they announced that Hester is pregnant in the promo, and that's really stupid if they do that. I hope that the show doesn't do that. They do not have room for a pregnancy storyline with all that's going on. There's no room for that. What is going to happen with Boone? Obviously, he wants to take out Gigi. We'll have to see what happens there. He makes himself known to everyone next week, it seems. We have 4 episodes left, and God help me, I have no idea what's going to happen. I really don't. Actually 5 episodes, because the last episode is 2 separate episodes. The last one is 2 separate episodes. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Like I said, very, very scattered. I really wanted to love it. There were a lot of things that really pissed me off, though. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of The Vampire Diaries. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.